Hello, and welcome to Adult Education at Covenant Presbyterian Church. This is the Adult Ed presentation for January 30th. Fully virtual still. We continue as we continue through most of this, doing our best and doing it in a way that is faithful to one another and to God's call on this body. We are blessed to be joined today by the Reverend Lisa Hart, who is coming to us from the United Church of Christ. She serves as the Associate Conference Minister for Faith Formation and Justice Ministries for the Wisconsin Conference of the UCC, which is really a cool title. And we are so blessed to join her. She preached one sermon already, and if you haven't had a chance yet, you can view it on YouTube or stick around on our YouTube page after this Zoom meeting and watch it live. But we are blessed to have her here talking with children and youth about sex and sexuality. It's a blessing, and I'm grateful for the opportunities afforded by Zoom and by your presence, and I look forward to today. So without further ado, let's pray. Holy and gracious God, you made us good. There's nothing that can change that, nothing that can take that from us. You made us good. You created us. You created our bodies. You created us in your image, and we are so blessed. We give thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation, for the willingness of your people to engage in a topic that touches on everything that you have given us. And we ask that this conversation may be one of growth, of learning, of hope, and of challenge. Amen. All right, Lisa, it is now.
All right, thank you. So, as Jeff said, I'm on the conference staff of the Wisconsin Conference of the United Church of Christ, and the title that he gave you is only half of my title because I have a whole nother position with them as well. And full disclosure, I am not a reverend. I'm a commissioned minister in the United Church of Christ, which is another form of authorization that we have. So I'm really excited to be with you here today. The materials that I will be talking about and the information I give you comes from the Our Whole Lives curriculum, which is a curriculum of the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association, a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum. It is something that is considered to be the gold standard for comprehensive sexuality education. So there are school districts that use it, community organizations. And the reason they're able to do that, even though this resource comes from faith organizations, is that we have the sexuality and our faith component as a separate companion to the actual comprehensive sexuality education, so that groups that want to use that can, but it's not something that is necessary if you're doing the program. This all began back in 1983 when the United Church of Christ decided that we needed to address sexuality amongst our members, and they did a needs assessment survey where it was asked that they create a curriculum, and since that time we've partnered with the Unitarian Universalists. Today, I do want to kind of find out a little bit about all of you. I work with youth, I work with adults. I've been a trained facilitator, but have not been able to do any of the programming in quite a while, partially because with COVID, they had put kind of a moratorium on doing the comprehensive sexuality education because they didn't feel that it was appropriate to do that, especially with children and youth online, that it was a much better experience and a safer and healthier experience when it was in person. So they are just now starting to resume trainings of facilitators and also running programs in local churches for youth. So anyway, I would like to find out from all of you what it is that you hope to take away from today's session. So you can
Right, here's an opportunity for you to join in. I'm keeping an eye out for anybody who may have their hands up, and if you know how to raise your hand in Zoom, go ahead or enter it into the chat. What are we looking for?
Melissa, I can see you. I can't see everybody, but
Yeah. I would say just, more knowledge. I listened to the sermon first before this, and it was fantastic. So thank you. And I think just destigmatizing the not talking about it is great. So that's what I'm looking for.
okay.
Thank you. And Mary Beth, I saw your hand. And then Barb, did you have something to do?
Yep, I'm one of the youth advisors for our high school youth group. And so I'm really interested. We're going to be delving into this with those students. And I just want to, have more information and think about it. And it sounds like this is the place to be.
All right.
Barb, if you have something to share, you can go ahead.
Just again, greater understanding and also things to think about when I'm around family members who've been in this spot, to be
Thank you.
compassionate.
And Brad?
One thing I'm interested in is, when does the conversation stop? And by that, I want to mention, when does the conversation stop? How do we talk to our children and about sex? Some of our children are 50.
Yeah.
If you have some comments on the degree to which this continues in adulthood or doesn't, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And then from Kim, looking for information about how to start conversations with her daughter, who's 4, working on consent and looking how to transfer that further. So
Okay.
how early and how late, and how much between.
Okay. And that
And Polly, I
reminds
see your hand up too. You got to unmute yourself, Polly.
I have a 6-year-old grandson and a 7-year-old granddaughter. And yeah, I'm wondering, they know the anatomy. I mean, it's great. We've got the book, the book. And but I'd like to know when to actually launch in, or do I wait for them to ask?
okay. Well, I think this gives me a good place to start. So I am going to pull up my presentation and we will touch on the things that you have mentioned. Let's see. All right. Okay, can you all see talking with children and youth about sex and sexuality?
Yep, you're good.
All right, perfect. Well, I think maybe what I will do is start with the guiding principles that the Our Whole Lives program is based on. Now, these are the guiding principles for the United Church of Christ. So they are faith-based guiding principles. The Unitarian Universalists have a different set, although they are similar. And I promise I will not just be reading through the whole thing. But in this case, there will be some that I read off the screen. So the first one, sexuality, is a God-given gift. And it's the idea that God created every one of us with the capacity to respond to and be in relationship with others and the world around us. One of the vital dimensions of this capacity is our sexuality. We are physical as well as spiritual and intellectual beings, and we have senses through which we can delight in the beauty of creation. Now, with the second principle, the purposes of sexuality are to enhance human wholeness and fulfillment. Understanding sexuality as a gift from God means that this dimension of our humanity is given for us for a purpose. Sexuality is a gift that calls us to wholeness as individuals. Another purpose of sexuality is to express love for and delight in another human being. Joy and pleasure are to be shared, and sexual expression in the context of a loving relationship is one way of sharing. And we also want to focus on the fact that sexuality can bring us into relationship with others and with the world, and it can be a means of giving glory to God. When making decisions about sexuality, we want to focus on the primary guide being God's call to love and justice as revealed in both testaments. And while we do use the Bible as our guide, to say that it's our primary source of inspiration and knowledge for Christians does not mean that it is the only one. So it is important for our understanding of human sexuality to be deepened and enriched when we avail ourselves of other accurate and up-to-date information and research. I just want to kind of go through these quickly, I think. Another guiding principle from a biblical perspective is sexuality is intended to express mutuality, love, and justice. In judging whether a behavior is ethical or unethical, the norms of mutuality and love and justice are the central criteria. Also, sexuality is distorted by unethical behaviors. Oops, sorry, I lost my spot here on my paper. It's distorted by unethical behaviors, attitudes, and systems that foster violence, exploitation, infidelity, assertion of power, and the treatment of persons as objects. And in developing a just sexual morality, we need to avoid having double standards. So these are all guiding principles based on our faith that we want to be using when we're talking to children, when we're talking to youth, when we're talking to other adults. A responsible and mature sexual ethic respects the moral agency of every person. When faced with ethical decisions, each of us needs to be accorded the freedom and responsibility to choose. So that means even when you're talking to children, you want to be equipping them and empowering them to have the knowledge that they need and to have the sense of self that they need to be able to make their own choices. We turn to scripture and call upon the Spirit in prayer and invite the counsel of trusted people as we seek to discern what the right thing is to do. But finally, it is up to each of us to choose and bear the consequences of our choices. So that's, I mean, when you think about that with our children, it can seem like a huge responsibility as parents and caregivers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, to be the ones that are helping to equip our children to make these decisions as they go through life. The church at all levels ought to be a context for discussion about human sexuality. Responsible choice about sexual matters is at the heart of Christian life. Therefore, the Christian community is obliged to provide information and opportunities for understanding the choices we face. Unfortunately, too often the church does remain silent, or the church just gives rules and does not necessarily engage in conversation to help people understand why they may be making the choices that they're making. And the church ought to encourage and support advocacy with those who are sexually oppressed or the victims of sexual violence and abuse. The church can and must have a role in defining and implementing public policy. Christians are called to shape a civic community in which justice and human well-being prevail. And that calling means that we stand in solidarity with the oppressed, including the sexually oppressed, and that we work for the enactment of just laws and the just distribution of resources. So now, see how I'm doing with my technology. Okay. So the Our Whole Lives curriculum, and I would say any sound comprehensive sexuality curriculum that's going to be used in a faith-based setting needs to have underlying values. And so with Our Whole Lives, we have underlying values for the whole curriculum, but we also have some for the various levels. So underlying the whole curriculum is that all children, and I would say all people, should be loved and cared for, respected and valued as unique individuals. Another value is sexuality is a natural and healthy part of living. Children learn about sexuality beginning at birth and it continues throughout their lifetime. Children learn about sexuality from how people touch them, talk with them, and expect them to behave as males or females, or in many cases, they may not identify with our traditional binary genders. The message that children receive affect their future attitudes, values, and behaviors. And then information about sexuality, human development, and sexual health should be presented to children in positive, accurate, and developmentally appropriate ways. So our curriculum starts for grades kindergarten through first grade, and then there's another component that's offered for children in grades 4 to 6. And the underlying values for those youngest children is that we are teaching them about respect, we're teaching them about relationships, and we're teaching them about responsibility. Not only responsibility to others, but responsibility to caring for themselves and for keeping themselves healthy. Then the next level that we offer is our youth curriculum, which is for grades 7 through 9 and grades 10 through 12. So there's 2 different components there. And then I have and beyond, and that's because we also do have an adult curriculum. We have a curriculum that is geared towards younger adults. We have one that is just a general adult curriculum, and we've recently developed a curriculum for older adults. And the reason for that is we were hearing from people, especially in some of our maybe assisted living facilities, nursing homes, settings like that, and even just older members in our congregations, that there were things that they did not know. There were things that they had not been taught. There were sexual experiences that they had negative feelings about and didn't know if it was normal to have those feelings. And then the other thing is the fact that their bodies are changing too. As we age, things change, and it changes for us sexually as well. And also the fact that relationship status may change. In some cases, people either are divorced or they've lost a spouse, or perhaps they've entered into a new relationship, and it's a different experience to enter into a new relationship as an older adult than it is when you're a teenager or a younger adult. So the curriculum addresses the topics that they may be interested in, and the values that underlie the curriculum for these levels is self-worth, and that idea that people are entitled to dignity and self-worth and to their own attitudes and beliefs about sexuality. With sexual health, the focus is on knowledge about human sexuality that's helpful, not harmful, and every person having the right to accurate information about sexuality and to having their questions answered. They learn about healthy sexual relationships, which are consensual, non-exploitative, mutually pleasurable, safe, developmentally appropriate, based on mutual expectations and caring, and they're respectful. And sexual intercourse is only one of the many valid ways of expressing sexual feelings with a partner. And we do teach that it is healthier for young teens to postpone sexual intercourse. So while they're able to make their own decisions, we try to give them information so that they understand the risks they're taking and the value or benefits that they may experience by delaying sexual activity. Another underlying value for these age groups is responsibility. We're called to enrich our lives by expressing sexuality in ways that enhance human wholeness and fulfillment, and that express love, commitment, delight, and pleasure. And all persons have the right and obligation to make responsible sexual choices. And then the final value that we focus on is justice and inclusivity. We do need to avoid double standards. People of all ages, sexual identities, races, ethnicities, genders, backgrounds, income levels, physical and mental abilities, and sexual orientations must have equal value and equal rights. Sexual relationships should never be coercive or exploitative. All the following are natural in the range of human sexual experience: being romantically and sexually attracted to more than one gender, the same gender, another gender, and or those with a more fluid understanding of their own and others' gender. And not experiencing sexual attraction is also a normal experience for some individuals. So those are the values that we base our lessons or our curriculum on. Are there questions at this point? If not, I'll talk about, oh,
Yeah, Polly has a question. Polly, go ahead.
oh, you muted.
Polly, you are on mute. Can you unmute and share?
I noticed that there's no curriculum for grades 2 and 3.
Yes, that's a good observation. The idea behind that is that at that age, there is not anything really in addition to what they would learn in K1 to offer. And the idea too is that these grade levels, while the materials are age appropriate for children at that age, they are also could be used. You might have a classroom of children who are in 1st and 2nd grade, or you might start the 4th grade curriculum with children who are in 3rd grade if you feel that it's developmentally appropriate for them. So that is why. And I will say in our churches, it's most common for churches to have trained facilitators and run programs with the middle school and high school youth. And there are some churches, but not as many, that do run the elementary program. What we have found is that the churches that run the elementary program often seem to have a, trying to think of the right word here, is the atmosphere, the environment in that congregation often seems to be healthier when it around talking about sex with kids. It becomes something that's natural. Parents are very much partners in this, especially with those younger children. They are considered the primary educator. And so they're involved with everything that takes place. In fact, some of the churches, rather than have the program offered in a group setting in the church, they help equip the parents to offer that information at home. But what we find is that children that begin to have these conversations when they're younger, and parents that become, and other caregivers that become comfortable having these conversations when their children are younger, foster an environment where the youth, when they reach grade 7 through 9 or 10 through 12, are much more comfortable talking with their parent, talking with other trusted adults about their experiences, asking their questions. So I would say there's a lot of value in starting young, but that's a long way of explaining why there's not a 2 to 3 curriculum, but gives you kind of an idea of how it's structured and why. With the older kids, sometimes churches will run this as a curriculum that goes throughout the year. They may not run it every year. They may run it with their 7th through 9th graders every 3 years, so that they all get it at least once. Or they may run it with just one of the age groups and then not touch on it again until the kids are in high school with the next level. Some churches have retreats where they come together and go through larger portions of the program. And through all of this, the parents are not, they're made aware of what's being talked about in the 7 through 9 and the 10 through 12 grade level, but they're not going to be privy to the actual conversations that take place. The youth are taught that they can trust that what they share in those circles will stay in those circles, with the one caveat that if someone shares something that lets the adult know, and it's always more than one adult that's in the group, but lets the adult know that there's something to be concerned about, that the youth is being harmed, or that there may be at risk of harming someone else, or they might harm themselves, that that will be taken to the proper people to talk about, the authorities or whoever needs to be brought into the conversation, and parents will also, if it's safe, be brought into that conversation. Are there other questions at this point? If not, I'll move on to talking just a little bit about the goals of the program. So these are pretty simple. It's to provide the accurate information that people need about sexuality. Now that's for all age levels, making sure that the information that's shared is accurate. To provide a forum in which all sincere questions are respected and addressed. One of the favorite things about this program, and I think they use it at all levels, but I know it gets used a lot with the youth, is to have a question box. And it's a place where youth or whoever's in the program can put their questions and have them asked without being singled out. So at some point during the sessions, they do go and they will pull out a question and answer it. And it tends to be a favorite time with the kids. Another goal is to provide learning about sexuality issues that includes not only facts, but also talks about feelings and values. And that's where the faith component comes in, around that value piece. And then also to help young people and adults develop the skills necessary to make healthy, responsible decisions throughout their life. There are some assumptions that we have with Our Whole Lives curriculum. One is that parents and caregivers are the primary educators of their children. Positive messages and values are the building blocks of healthy sexuality. So as a parent or caregiver, telling your children what you know and value and telling them what you want and expect from them is important. And it's also your right as well as a responsibility that you have to them. Children are going to learn and carry away what they have been taught by you. Another assumption is that sexuality education begins and primarily takes place at home. Recent surveys are showing that teens say that parents have more influence on their decisions about sex than their friends, popular culture, siblings, teachers, or educators do. And I think that is interesting to hear, because I know a lot of times parents feel like their kids are not, especially their teenagers, don't listen to them at all, and that they're going to go and do what their friends are doing or what they see on TV. But the research is showing that actually the parents have more influence. Another assumption is that parents and caregivers should begin teaching about sexuality on the first day of a child's life. And that is based on the assumption that children begin learning even as babies by the way they're touched when they're diapered and when they're fed. Loving touch helps a baby to understand the good feelings that can come with touch. And the natural touch of genitals that occurs in diapering can communicate that genitals are not shameful. As babies, we begin to explore their genitals. The response that parents and caregivers communicate helps to shape how children feel about whether that's okay. I mean, one thing you can do is teach children appropriate places and times for that exploration rather than scolding them. When they're scolded, that gives them that negative feeling. But if you can teach them that, hey, this is part of your body and it's okay to explore your body, but there are times and places where it's appropriate to do that. That is a good lesson for them to learn. They also begin to learn about gender by the way in which their parents and caregivers express themselves. So by the time they've reached their first birthday, they've learned a great deal about sexuality. And that will have a strong impact on their further development. Another assumption is that open communication I skipped one, I think I skipped the children need accurate and clear and age appropriate information about sexuality. It's important to provide children with straightforward and accurate information at every stage of their development. And when you can partner with someone who is trained in comprehensive sexuality education, if the people in your faith community, the leaders in your faith community are trained, that can be an added support as you work on that. Open communication creates a healthy family environment and nurtures trust. So talk with your children about sexuality often and early. Children will understand what they are ready to understand at each age. And look for teachable moments, because every teachable moment is an opportunity to discuss not only facts, but also values and feelings. You should listen attentively to your children and tell them that you respect their ideas and feelings. And it's a good idea to have books and resources available home, some that are for you that will help you know how to have these conversations and maybe recognize teachable moments, and some for your children to read, and then some for you to read together. Sexuality education should include information about the misuse and abuse of sexuality. Helping children to understand that there's a potential for abuse without frightening them is important, because with accurate information and open communication, you are able to empower your children to recognize abusive behaviors and help them deal with any fears that they may have. And if an adult learns that a child has been sexually abused, they're in a role or position where they can assure that child that the abuse was not their fault, and that caring adults will support them in dealing with the experience. But I think, when you can share information about this, it gives children a voice. It helps them. And if you've created an environment where they don't feel ashamed about their bodies, they don't feel ashamed about their sexuality, they're going to be more comfortable opening up and saying, hey, something's going on that's not right. And they're hopefully going to be less likely to feel that if something is happening, that it's their fault. And sexuality education should center on the gift of sexuality and nurture the values of respect, reciprocity or relationship, and responsibility. By interacting with children in respectful and caring ways, you're inviting them to interact with others in the same way. In creating an accepting and affirming environment with your children, you model these values. A child with a strong and positive sense of self is more likely to make careful, responsible decisions. So along with these assumptions also come concerns, and that's what I often hear more from parents when we're talking about offering comprehensive sexuality education in a faith setting, are the concerns that they have. So to address those, one is, why should we talk about sexuality with young children? A lot of times people just feel like, they're not ready for that yet. It's not appropriate, and nothing could be further from the truth. Sexuality educators have identified at least 3 reasons for beginning to talk with children and this is in the preschool years. So this would be prior to them entering into any formal program. But they absorb information from you like sponges. And you're teaching them about health and science. If you can remember that you're teaching them about their bodies and how their bodies work. That's health and science. And your silence could teach them that in your family, it's not okay to talk about that subject. Another reason is you don't want to allow the media or someone else to do the teaching for you. Children need years to understand and integrate the information you want to give them, especially the values that you have for your family and around your religion. And so if you're the one that's talking to them first, you're going to be the voice that stands out to them the most. And then the other thing is knowledge is protection. And like I said before about the sexual abuse, worldwide studies are showing that children who are educated about healthy bodies and healthy sexuality are better protected from abuse and exploitation. Sexuality is a natural, healthy, and normal part of being human. And our sexuality, when we're talking to our children, includes talking to them about our bodies and how our bodies work, our genders, our gender identities, and the gender roles and expectations that we may have. And now when we're talking about that, it's really important for parents also to be listening to their children, to hear who their children know themselves to be. And we talk about values of life, and we talk about the people that our lives touch. Sexuality also includes how we feel about all of these dimensions, as well as how we experience relationships, intimacy, and love. And our responsibility as parents and caregivers and adults is to provide children with that accurate information, to create open opportunities for them to ask questions and engage in conversations with us, for us to share our values with them, and for them to be able to talk about what they feel their values are, and to help them develop the interpretation skills that are needed for establishing meaningful relationships and taking care of their sexual health. So an even bigger concern that I often hear from people is, why are we talking about this at church? And there are several reasons for that. One is that we want to help children to identify the values and attitudes that we as a faith community and as people of God have. We want them to have that information so that as they're making decisions for themselves, they can be based on their understanding of their relationship with God and what our faith story has taught them. We also want to make sure that we're providing accurate information. And we want to foster the ability to create healthy relationships. They learn through our conversations with each other how they can communicate. They learn to talk about what feels good to them and to listen to others about what feels good to them or to the other person. They learn about consent. They learn about boundaries. And then the other thing is, once they've learned about creating these healthy relationships, we want to teach them to be responsible in those relationships, not only with other people, but also in their relationship to themselves and caring for their bodies. Are there other questions at this point? Whoops, sorry about that. I'll talk a little bit about guidelines for talking with children, because I think this will be important. And so the guidelines that I want to share with you is that it's important to show love and demonstrate affection. Loving, caring touch nurtures children's self-esteem and positive feelings towards others. And when you are able to demonstrate warmth, affection, and support for children, or if they witness you demonstrating that with other adults, you're nurturing the child, you're communicating care, and you're showing how to behave in interpersonal relationships. So remember to touch and hug your children and show love, regardless of their age, but be sensitive to the kind of touch that your children enjoy at each age level. So that's one thing to think about. A lot of times, and I don't know if you all have had this experience, but I can remember as a child going to my grandparents or going to see cousins that I hadn't seen for forever, and being told that I had to hug someone. And that is something that we need to be sensitive about. If a child does not want to touch or hug someone, it is not okay for us to be telling them that to show respect for that person that they have to touch or hug that person. We need to listen to them and respect the fact that that doesn't feel good for them at that moment. And that will help in preventing abusive situations, because when we're told that we have to do something to show respect for someone, that carries over into other situations where we may feel like we have to let someone touch us to show respect for them. And that is not mutuality. Another thing is you want to use accurate, age-appropriate language. So when talking with children, remember to use simple and concrete words that they can understand. So obviously, as they get older, your conversations are going to become a little more complex and use bigger words and maybe share more information. But when they're young, just use simple things. It's important for children to be taught about their bodily functions and their sexual parts. And they learn, it's important for them to know that they have the right to ask questions and that adults are willing to discuss those topics with them. If sometimes adults are uncomfortable talking with children because they don't want to use the accurate words for body parts, if that is the case for you, practice doing that in the mirror. When you're alone, just practice saying it over and over again. It'll feel strange, but the more comfortable you become with it, the better you'll be able to have those conversations with your child. And that is an important part of keeping them safe, for them to be able to identify the various body parts and to know when something is okay and when something is not okay with those body parts. Create an anti-bias environment in your home. Give messages through your words and actions that differences in human beings, whether it's race and ethnicity, sex and gender, age, ability, that they're positive topics to talk about. Establish a family ground rule that it is unacceptable to use sexist language, to stereotype genders, ages, races, and other differences, or to reject anyone based on appearance. All children need to learn that their bodies are beautiful. So you're not only teaching your child that their body's beautiful, but you want to help them understand that the bodies of all the other people around them are also beautiful, even if they look different. Be an askable adult or parent or caregiver. When adults are askable, they convey an attitude of openness to their children and set the stage for a lifelong process of questioning and learning. So that carries over into the question about when do we stop having these conversations? Hopefully we don't. I have a son who is almost 30 and he is married, and they are trying to have children and it's not going so well for them. And both my son and my daughter-in-law have been able to call me up and have conversations about their frustrations, about their concerns. And that's because I set a tone of being an askable parent. They know they can talk to me about anything. I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to laugh at them. I'm not going to dismiss them. And if I don't have the answer, I'm going to be honest and tell them that I don't have the answer, but that I'm willing to help them find that answer with them. Another thing is to focus on the goals that you have in talking with your children. So even if you're uncomfortable talking about sexuality, the purpose of these conversations with your child is usually to answer questions, to eliminate fears, and to build the child's self-confidence. So remember, that is why you're having those conversations. And that can help you not feel so self-conscious about the things that you're uncomfortable with. Plan ahead how you will respond to questions and plan to keep your responses short and simple. You don't want to give an answer to a young child that goes far beyond their ability to understand or is more than what they were asking for. And as they get older, you may have more in-depth conversations. You want to provide opportunities for children to learn through observation and to discover things for themselves. Now that can be a little distressing for parents to read when we're talking about sexuality education and we're talking about observation. But what they're talking about is have your child spend some time with someone who's pregnant. Visit people who work in non-traditional gender roles. Interact with families from diverse backgrounds. When it comes to if your child's asking questions, you know, have some toys or books in the house that are the dolls that are anatomically complete. Have playhouse and dress up clothing that provides an opportunity for children to explore who it is that they are, not who it is that their sex at birth or the assigned sex at birth tells them they should be. Have books in the house, and I can provide a list of resources of books that could be shared that are appropriate for a variety of ages. The other thing is to use teachable moments. When something happens and a question is asked or a situation occurs where you realize it's an opportunity to share one of your values or to maybe respond more to something that a child has been wondering about, take that opportunity, don't put it off. It will have more of an impact on the child if you have taken that opportunity to talk about it. Are there other questions at this point? And we're getting closer to the end of our time here. I think without using my presentation, I'm actually going to stop the screen share. I'll talk just a little bit about debunking some of the myths. So one concern and myth that's out there is that comprehensive sexuality education will encourage kids to have sex and that it does not encourage abstinence. Research actually shows that having information about being sexually active, including accurate information about our bodies, the risks of engaging in sexual activity, and information about contraceptives and how to use them, and about boundaries and consent actually tends to delay when someone engages in sexual behaviors. When they have all the information, it's something that they're more likely to want to put off. It does include teaching about abstinence as well. And it equips people with information and knowledge to help them make informed decisions. And because they have that knowledge, they're able to protect themselves if they do decide to become sexually active. Another myth is that it disregards values and morals. And the reality is, it's not possible to do any type of education that is values free. It's not that there aren't values, it's about which values and morals are being lifted up. So as an adult in a child's life or a young adult's life or a teenager's life, you have the opportunity to influence that person by sharing your values and your morals. Another myth is that abstinence-only programs are the most effective sexuality education programs out there. And actually, an October 2020 issue of the Journal for Adolescent Health published a review of 3 decades worth of comprehensive sexuality education programs in schools. And they found that it was comprehensive sexuality education that was effective in preventing unintentional pregnancies and sexually transmitted infections. They also found that it helped to prevent child abuse, sexual abuse, and dating and intimate partner violence because it helped to promote healthy relationships. And it also reduced bullying for LGBTQ youth. They've also found that the abortion rate in states that offer comprehensive sexuality education are actually lower, that fewer pregnancies obviously lead to fewer abortions. So there are some benefits to offering comprehensive sexuality education that go beyond just sharing our values. Also a belief that if we offer comprehensive sexuality education, it's going to be taking the authority away from the parents and the scope of, and reducing their scope of influence. But as I shared earlier, teens are reporting that their parents have the strongest influence on them. And you need to remember that a few hours of education outside of the home is never going to override all the years of influence that they have with you. The other thing I would say is just remember to be age appropriate when you're talking with children and youth. I know I've said that before, but that's something that's really important to remember. If a child is talking about it, they're ready to learn about it. They may not be ready to learn everything about it, but they're ready to learn something about it. So try not to dismiss those questions. Are there any, I know we're really getting to the end of our time. Is there anything else that anyone has questions about?
Looking around, scanning the room. No, it does not seem that there are any further questions, but for my part, I just want to say thank you so much. Really grateful for your presence here, for your ministry, for the work that you do, and for the ways in which you share that. This is a better world when this is what we can do. And so I thank you for the work with the Kingdom of God.
And if it's okay, I'll share one other resource. I wasn't able to share it with you today because it's not out yet. It was supposed to be out earlier this month, but they're actually debuting it this Wednesday, I think. But Our Whole Lives is going to be launching a video series that are short videos, like 10 minutes or less, I think, that are designed for parents and caregivers for talking with young children about issues around sex and sexuality. It's called Under Your Wing. And as soon as that resource is available, I will get information to Charlie or Jeff about how you might access that online. It'll be something that you can go in, I believe, and on demand, you can watch a video on whatever topic it is that you're looking for support in.
Wonderful. And if we have links to these, this presentation will be added to the church's YouTube page, and we can, I believe, put the links in the description of the video. And so for anybody looking for resources, as soon as I get those links and get the video uploaded, we can you can find your way there and find the resources there. So keep an eye on our YouTube page for that. And I'm sure there are other areas in which we can house these resources. So if you're looking for them, please reach out to me or to anybody at the church.
Thank you.
And then being aware of the time and the fact that you have to preach in a few minutes, would you mind if I close this in prayer?
That would be great. Thank you, Jeff.
Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for the gift of each other, for the gift of our bodies, and for the gift of language which we can use to talk with one another. Help us to find the words, guide our conversation so that it may be holy and faithful to you and your creation. Give us opportunities, continual opportunities to support one another, to build one another up, and to ensure that goodness and mercy shall reign, and that righteousness may guide us, that righteousness and love, and above all, respect and care for the image that you have given to us. Amen. All right, thank you everybody for being here. If you have not had a chance to worship with us yet, we've got worship coming up very soon. And the conversation continues at noon. Look at your email for the link to that. And in the meantime, take care. God loves you, and I love you, and I look forward to the time when we can be back together in person. Bye all.
Bye, everyone.